SoapBox News is brought to you by the Small Business Surgeon podcast and by Texas Media Foundry. Engineer your reality. Hello and welcome to today's episode of SoapBox News. My name is Samuel Smith. I am the Small Business Surgeon. Thank you so much for joining us today. You notice I am flying solo today. My co-host Nina Kicharovsky is down in Houston. She has a business that she runs, so she can't be here every day. We are looking for 2 or 3 other co-hosts that we can rotate through because I actually have a job as well. I'm the Small Business Surgeon. I've got other things to do, but this is SoapBox is a passion project. It's a labor of love, and we are working our way towards building the first completely censorship-free platform for broadcasters and for journalists. So it is definitely a labor of love. We will be rotating hosts through. So I got a few people sign up over the weekend to be hosts. The point of SoapBox News is so that we can discuss things that are already in the news. I don't have a whole army of journalists running around. I don't have a whole bunch of fact checkers. Everything I try to display, everything I try to show you is already in the news. Just trying to engage in dialogue and have some discussions about some of the things that affect us in the day-to-day running of our lives. So if you've got anything that you want us to discuss, if there's any news articles you think we should be paying attention to, you can find us at soapboxnews.com. Send them over there to us. You can send them via Facebook, email, carrier pigeon, however you want to do it. This is just us trying to practice putting out a news program, trying to have discussions, and just see where it goes, because it is something that I feel is important. It does need to be discussed, and it's something we'd like to grow and take a look at. So if you're interested in helping out, being a co-host, hit me up. If you've got topics, hit me up. I will say, over the weekend, I had a whole lot of people send me UFO topics to discuss. We're not going to go down those kind of rabbit holes. I would love to do some kind of special on the Space Force and all the new disclosure things that are starting to drop out. There's a whole bunch of stuff that has been even on Joe Rogan, even started to make it into the mainstream. So yes, I would like to do that, but no, we don't need to talk about that every single day. But I did get a lot of people send me UFO stories to cover. So I don't know. Dan, do we have any tinfoil? We could make me a tinfoil hat, maybe. Anyway, on to today's news. So we've picked out some headlines. What we're going to do is read a little bit about the news articles. I'll share my screen with you guys. You can see what I'm looking at, and then maybe offer some suggestions onto what we can do. So, excuse me, please. Did Walter Cronkite ever cough on camera, or did they cut that out? Exactly. All right, so first headline up. This is from the Jerusalem Post. All right, the Ukraine rules out ceasefire talks with Russia to end the war. Ukraine's Prosecutor General told the BBC that collecting evidence of war crimes committed by Russia is crucial to holding it accountable. My goodness. Are there any experts on the Russia-Ukraine situation? And the reason I ask is because several news stories right now are running in tandem, in conjunction with one another. I don't know the right words for that, as regards what's going on in Ukraine. And I don't think that any of us really know the truth. And we'll start to touch on it later in the show as I look at other headlines. But the Jerusalem Post says, and they are directly quoting the BBC, so in future maybe I'll just go to the BBC for the article, I don't know. Ukraine will not consider entering ceasefire negotiations with Russia, Ukrainian Prosecutor General Andrei Kostin, I think I got that right, I'm not sure, declared in interviews to the BBC over the weekend. I don't think that the issue of resuming any negotiations is possible. Man, what do you do with Ukraine? What do you do with Russia? If you are a Ukraine expert, come and find me, shoot me a DM. I'd love to interview on the show, because we've got so many sources saying that Ukraine is getting hammered by the Russians and the Russians are bad. And I'm looking at pictures now, and you can see my screen here. There's a lot of destruction in Ukraine. There's a lot of shit going down in Ukraine. Washington Post is asking if Ukraine's being forced into a ceasefire. it's a very, very messy subject. And the reason that we're talking about Ukraine right now is because it directly affects everything that goes on in Europe. Not only is Ukraine a huge hub for money, as we'll find out later in the show, it's a huge hub for energy too. A lot of the resources that are coming from Russia to Europe have to pass through the Ukraine or through Syria. I don't know. Might want to check into that. But this is huge, huge implications for Europe over the winter and the price of energy, and especially natural gas. So that's why we keep coming back to Ukraine. Again, if I've got a Ukraine expert out there, I would love to hear from you and interview you. Now, we will come back to Ukraine later in the show. But the next headline up, and this is a really good one. I'm not sure how many of you actually watch television anymore. I don't. But I saw this, and I'm going to switch over. Now, this is deadline.com. If you did not see Dave Chappelle's monologue the other night on Saturday Night Live, you owe it to yourself to go look. Comedy and satire has always been used historically to shout out against people that are running things. Like, the jester was the only one allowed to make fun of the king. And these jesters are kind of the only ones that are really allowed to make fun of stuff by making it funny so we can all laugh at them. But really, we know there's something underlying there. So the headline from Deadline reads, Saturday Night Live opening monologue by Dave Chappelle draws Anti-Defamation League fire, claims it popularizes anti-Semitism. The National Director of Jewish Civil Rights Organization, the Anti-Defamation League, has tweeted out concerns over comedian Dave Chappelle's opening monologue last night on Saturday Night Live. Chappelle, a controversial comedian who has been accused of insensitivity in the past surrounding his observations about trans people, Jews, blacks, and others, did a long tape to open Saturday Night Live regarding recent issues involving rapper Kanye West and basketballer Kyrie Irving. Well, my take on this, why is it that you can't call a spade anymore? I know it might be insensitive, but sometimes you might just need a little insensitivity to get through to the truth. I should mute my phone while I'm doing it. It is muted. Did you not see me set these? Dan saw me mute everything. Don't know why it's ringing. Anyway, that'll be all right. So, back to the story at hand. If you can't make fun of stuff, if you can't poke fun at people, I don't know. How do you silence everybody? How do you silence comedians? And historically, comedians have always been able to say kind of what they feel. Now, if crime rates are high in black communities, and I say crime rates are high in black communities, and here's the data that shows that, that doesn't necessarily make me a racist. That makes me somebody that's presenting data factually. If I say something about transvestites, that is factual. Let's say, for example, that men who choose to become women and then compete in women's sports have an unfair biological advantage against women. That's a scientific fact. I don't care what kind of clothes you wear or whether you decide to amend your body to fit the right category of sex you are. I don't care. Nobody cares, right? But by saying that, hey, maybe guys that were born as guys should compete as guys, all of a sudden I've become transphobic and my opinion must be silenced. By saying that, wow, these historically black areas have higher crime rates, and by saying, is there some kind of connection between the way that the family units have been destroyed in lower socioeconomic classes and crime? Can you say that without being racist? Why not? The data's there, the data supports it. And like Kanye has said, and like Dave Chappelle said in his monologue, there are many, many businesses in Hollywood that are owned by people of the Jewish faith. Does that mean all Jews are bad? Absolutely not. My best friend is a Jew. Well, he's Jewish, right? He likes bacon, drinks alcohol occasionally, Jewish. Right, but my best friend's a Jew. So to say all Jews are evil is completely wrong. But for somebody to go, wow, that's a really strong coincidence. There sure are a lot of Jewish business owners in the movie industry. That is a fair assumption based on the data that's available. Okay, that's not anti-Semitic. That's me saying, damn, there's a lot of Jewish lads own a lot of movie businesses. But I could just as easily go and say, man, there's a lot of rich white guys own Premier League football clubs. Could say that, right? You see how, like, by being unable to question links that are glaringly obvious, we're being beaten into submission. So gangs run everything, right? The Italian fellas run New York. Maybe the Jewish fellas run Hollywood. You know? I don't know. But why are we not allowed to say it out loud? What is it that we're touching on that is exposing such a nerve? So I encourage you all, and I will put the link in the show notes, I encourage you all to run out and check out Dave's opening monologue, Dave Chappelle. It's about 9-10 minutes long. And, you know, I don't think that Kanye was right, and I don't think that Kyrie was right, but I certainly don't think the reactions to what they've said have been in, what's that word? In direct correlation to the actions that they committed. I don't think that the responses to what they've said have been, I think they've been extremely heavy-handed. And if you want to know who rules you, find out who you can't criticize. So I'd say there was definitely a little bit of smoke, and where there's smoke, there might be fire. So it might be worth looking at. All right, moving on. Next headline that we're going to address is the Afghan Supreme Leader orders full implementation of Sharia law. Now, I don't really know what's going on in Afghanistan since the US troop pullout. So again, if we've got any Afghanistan conflict experts, I would love to bring one in and interview you on the show. Afghanistan's Supreme Leader has ordered judges to fully enforce aspects of Islamic law that include public executions, stonings, floggings, and the amputation of limbs for thieves, the Taliban's chief spokesperson said. Now, this is coming from The Guardian, who is quite a trusted news source. So I would, and the fellow that wrote it, I can't pronounce his name, but he's in Kabul. So there's a lot of names I can't pronounce in here, and I'm not going to attempt to pronounce them. So now we've gone from having a territory that's been occupied for 15 to 20 years by Americans, completely left open with a power vacuum. These fellas have took charge again, and not to mention all the weapons that were left there by America ended up in the hands of these guys. So the US taxpayer has paid, what is his name? Hibatullah Akhundzada. There we go. We're going to go with that. Hibatullah Akhundzada. They've paid these guys in weapons. And so now we've got this fucking terrorist organization that runs an entire country that's been funded by the US taxpayer, which just to me seems absolutely insane. But you better beware again of saying that out loud, because when you track where the money's gone and where the weapons were left and who they were left to, now we've got leadership in a country that wants to impose Sharia law. Now, is Sharia law a bad thing? Not necessarily. Now, to hear me say that out loud is quite strange. However, I firmly believe in public executions if people have done some incredibly fucked up shit. Like, I don't know, perpetrated crimes against humanity, for example, by money laundering or by stealing taxpayer money or whatever it is. Like, you know, the punishment for pedophilia, I am in full agreement that those guys need to be fed after having received due process and being found guilty. They need to be fed feet first into a wood chipper. Turn it on, problem solved, pedophile gone. So the Afghanis aren't too terribly far off the mark, because I bet if we started hanging people that were corrupt, and if we started putting pedophiles in wood chippers, there'd be a lot less corruption and a lot fewer pedophiles. That said, I don't fancy really living in Afghanistan. I think the government of Afghanistan and the people in charge there, it's very, very dangerous for regular individuals to try to live there. I think that the US and the European governments made an absolute disaster out of Afghanistan. And I think that the reason for continuing ongoing conflict and ongoing wars like this, the more you look at it, the more you start to understand, is to wash tax dollars out of the United States and the European taxpayer bases and wash those tax dollars into a military-industrial complex that is supported by these continuing wars. You see, so taxpayer, war, government, taxpayer, war, government, and they just keep moving that money through and taking the money that's allotted for foreign aid and putting it into these military programs. So yeah, a little bit deep there, might cut a little bit, but do we really want to leave Afghanistan in the hands of somebody that is eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hand for a hand, and cutting off limbs? That's bad news over there. If we've got any Afghanistan like specialists, I would love to interview you on the show and get your take on it. All right, next thing to look at, we're going to, and this all ties back into Ukraine, we're going to look at the FTX crash again. Now, FTX is the crypto exchange that went down last week, causing huge amounts of ripples throughout the financial industry. Now, there are several stories starting to emerge here. As you see my screen, if we run over to Reddit real quick, when we look at the top individual contributors to Democratic campaigns, Sam Bankman-Fried was the #2 Democrat donor, the #6 largest private donor of all the donors for this election cycle, with close to $40 million to the Democrats. When you dig a little deeper, he also donated $23 million to the Republicans. But a lot of the more right-wing news places are covering that up. But I'm neither wing, okay? I'm like a common sense dude. I'm like, if it smells like shit, it probably is shit, right? But they don't want you looking. So when you look, almost $65 million from this fella, from FTX, went into political donations for the 2022 campaign cycle. That should warrant a look. But now we look at the UKR report from Twitter. Ukraine military aid from USA was invested in crypto by the Ukraine. Now that sounds a little strange, doesn't it? Well, I'm not a journalist, so I have to rely on the work of other journalists. And I dug around the internet and I found this wonderful report from the Hal Turner radio show. Now, again, Hal Turner is a journalist out of New Jersey. He's very well respected. And what he has done in his story is back up all of his claims with sources. So we'll put the link to this into the show notes for today. The Hal Turner radio show. Ukraine partners with FTX and Everstake to launch new crypto donation website. And that was an article by journalist Danny Nelson. Let's see if I can find the date on that article. And so in the Hal Turner, what Hal Turner's done in this article, he says, the sudden collapse of crypto exchange FTX and its bankruptcy filing today has revealed that FTX presently suffers from 10 to 50 billion in liabilities with almost zero assets. Among those liabilities are investments made by Ukraine. I don't even know where to begin with this, but there is a wonderful overview video. It's about 1.5 minutes of the FTX collapse and how, if you come in here and look at my screen, how the political donations were done. So this is straight out of Twitter. Again, you can't really trust Twitter journalism as opposed to any other journalism. It's like the man you hear on the street. Well, they know and they said, and who's they? Well, you have to have sources for all of this. So what Hal Turner's done is try to find as many sources as he can. So there is a story that may or may not be true. And I'm going to read it, and I'm going to encourage you guys to do your own legwork and to do your own homework and to do your own investigation. I can only report what I can find. Okay? I'm trying to validate as much as I can. I'm trying to make as many claims as I can be true, but like with all news and with all media, everything is presented from the angle of the guy that's writing it. So I'm trying to be unbiased. I'm trying to present you this and say, go and look into this yourselves. Don't believe everything you read. Don't believe everything I tell you. Everything I tell you is as true as I understand it to be. But this could be completely made up. They could be feeding me shit. I don't know. So, a true scandal opening for the Biden administration, and there's a timeline laid out. April 25th, 2019, Biden announces presidential campaign. 13 days later, Sam Bankman-Fried, the son of Barbara Fried, who is the Stanford professor and co-founder of the political fundraising organization Mind the Gap, 13 days after Biden announces his presidency run, they launched the FTX crypto exchange. That's a huge red flag there already, because the dude's mom is in charge of a political fundraising organization. The exchange becomes an overnight success, and Bankman-Fried becomes the biggest donor to Biden's campaign. On election day, FTX explodes completely. Now, it goes deeper than that. His brother is the founder of Guarding Against Pandemics. The family aunt is tied to the World Economic Forum. The dad, Joseph Bankman, a Stanford professor who's lobbied on behalf of hedge fund managers. You see, this goes incredibly deep. The funniest bit of all, who's handling the bankruptcy of FTX? John J. Ray III, who worked on the liquidation of Enron. FTX is a partner in the World Economic Forum. Hal Turner has done his homework on this, and I encourage you to go to his website and take a look, and you can see all of the political donations that Sam Bankman-Fried has used to bankroll. Now, Hal Turner has focused on the Democrats. He was a very big donor to the Republicans as well, so this goes along both sides, all right? But you can see here, going all the way down, there he is. Oh my God, this is such a mess. FTX was based in the Bahamas. Now, before this all happened a couple of weeks ago, there was a fella murdered in the Bahamas. He was a huge crypto guy. His name eludes me. I'll have to go look it up for the segment. But there was a fella murdered in the Bahamas for leaking that this was all a scam and it was a human trafficking ring. Now, again, we don't want to connect those dots and go that deep into this, but I thoroughly encourage you to look up what's been happening with FTX and where the money's actually gone, because what it looks like has just been a massive Ponzi scheme, and everybody involved has been taken for a ride by this fucking kid. I mean, look at him. Like, I don't know. I mean, his mother might love him, but Jesus. All right. That'll do for that. We'll leave that alone. There is definitely something going on between FTX, campaign donations, and money laundering. And yes, I believe it needs a little bit further investigation. All right, so what's the next story on the list? Let's look here. Oh, yes. Okay, we've got just one more story to cover today. The US seeks 15 years for Elizabeth Holmes over the Theranos fraud. How many of you kept up with this? How many of you know this story? How many of you have read the book Blood Money? So Elizabeth Holmes was just this superstar Silicon Valley girl, and her company developed a machine that was able to read blood incredibly quickly from a little bit of a finger prick, and it all went wrong when they couldn't get the correct results from the prick and they needed larger amounts of blood. The selling point of the machines, though, was that it worked off a little prick. Can I say that? The selling point of the machines was it worked off a very, very, very small amount of blood, and it was supposed to be able to read all of these factors that normally, I don't know if you guys have blood work done. I get mine done once a quarter, and they always pull like 3 or 4 vials. Like, they're pulling vials. And what Theranos was doing was advertising instant results. You put your finger in, you get it pricked, boom, results come out of the machine, it's done. And they were selling them to medical offices like all over the country. That's what they were trying to do. And they were collecting these orders, and they did never deliver the machines because what they had promised they were unable to deliver. However, she went so deep into this fraud and into this shell game of robbing Peter to pay Paul. Eventually, the entire thing collapsed. So it says here from the article, a jury convicted the 38-year-old on 4 counts of wire fraud and conspiracy in January. Each count carries a maximum 20-year prison term. Any sentence would likely be served concurrently. Prosecutors said she lied to investors from 2010 to 2015 by promising Theranos Inc.'s technology could run many tests on 1 drop of blood from a finger prick. Holmes had pleaded not guilty to charges that she lied about Theranos, including that its technology could detect diseases with a few drops of blood, and said the firm's lab directors were in charge of test quality. Now, if you read the book, that statement appears to be untrue based on the interviews and the story inside of the book. The story inside of the book was that she was doing it on purpose and had nowhere to turn and was unable to fulfill the promises that she had wanted this tech to create. So it was a very, very interesting story because she was only 19 when she launched the company. And at one point, it was a $9 billion company. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're ever sitting there scratching your head and you're going, how's these 19-year-old kids making billions of dollars? Most of them aren't. Most of them end up in jail. So yeah, very, very interesting developments in the Theranos case. I personally do hope she serves a little bit of time. She defrauded a lot of people out of a lot of money. So yeah, if you have not read up on Bad Blood and the Theranos story, it's definitely worth a read. All right, anything else to add to the show, Dan? Oh, I don't know. All right, well, that looks like we're going to wrap it up today. I am, again, without my co-host, Nina Keterovsky. She is down in Houston doing a job for a client, and I've got other client jobs to do too. So if you know anybody that would make a good co-host to rotate through here, if you're an expert on the Ukraine, if you're an expert on Afghanistan, if you're an expert on the economy, or even if you're an expert on just being an expert, I would love to interview you and find a little bit of content for the show. All right, that's going to do it for us today. Don't forget, this show is sponsored by the Texas Media Foundry and by the Small Business Surgeon, both of which are my companies, and that's how we pay for this. So if there's anything that we can do for you, just give us a shout. You know where to find us. And please share the show and tune in tomorrow. I'll see you soon.
This is SoapBox News, brought to you by the Small Business Surgeon Podcast. Check it out on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you find your podcasts. And by Texas Media Foundry. Video production for transportation, industrial, small and large businesses all across the country. Check them out at txfoundry.com.